you're really good at filling gaps. So some of these gaps have been there for ages, but you've been able to zone in and fill those gaps and let the community and the public know that you are in touch, both feet are on the ground, and you hear the needs of the people. So I wanted to thank you for doing that, and thank you so much for being a part of Black Women in Radio podcast.
Yes, thank you for the invite. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, for those people who do not know you, I would love you to introduce yourself and tell us why you are taking an upgrade in the political field.
All right, thank you so very much, Felicia. And thank you to the Black Women in Radio, which have definitely always have been a supporter of radio, whether it's women in radio or men in radio. We're bringing y'all down to the state capitol every year. But I'm State Representative Valencia Stovall of House District 74, and I'm a current representative that represents portions of Monroe, Lake City, Forest Park, College Park, and Riverdale, all in Clayton County. And been serving in the Georgia House of Representatives for 8 years. And in those 8 years, and also born and raised in Atlanta, but of course live in Forest Park now. But during those 8 years, I've seen with a lot of the legislation that we passed, that we've really been putting bandages on issues. And these are major issues that we were hoping, with legislation we can solve them, but they're really issues that have to be resolved on the federal level. And as we've seen now with COVID-19 and all of everything that's happening with that, whether it's the financial crisis that we're going through, the health crisis, the business crisis, economic crisis that we're going through as well, the resolve has to come from Congress. Like we're right now waiting for a decision between the House and the Senate to make a decision on funds to come down to our local communities. And so I want to take my 8 years of working bipartisan. I've been able to work with both Democrats and Republicans to pass meaningful legislation. I am running as an independent, and the reason I chose to run as an independent, during my tenure at the state capitol, I've had to battle against my current party, which is Democratic Party, on issues that I believe are people issues and not party issues. And because of that, I want to go to Washington, D.C. as an independent, thinking independently, understanding the value of the Democratic Party, understanding the value of the Republican Party. But at the end of the day, I want to be a champion for all of Georgians. The issues we're facing are not partisan issues, and they should not be treated as such. And so that is the reason why I'm running as an independent. And it's for a special election for U.S. Senate that'll be held November the 3rd. So this particular seat was once held by Senator Johnny Isakson, who decided to retire in December. And so the governor made an appointment for a person to fill this seat until an election happens. Because it's on because the elected position, the people have to vote for who they want to stand out the remainder of the 2 years of this term that Senator Isakson had.
I noticed that the parties are very muddied. There's no clear-cut party anymore in terms of Republican or Democrat. We're not as confident receiving a ticket for one party or the other, knowing that we have people with the same values and ideas anymore. How did the waters get so muddy?
I would say that when you have people that are more beholden to party values instead of looking at what the actual needs of the people and not willing to change and shift those values because of time, those values shift to a certain extent. I'm not saying, tremendously shift, but then you have power. There's a power struggle when it comes down to those parties. Somebody wants to be the victorious at the end. I want to be able to say, I won, I beat the other party. And so when it becomes that type of conversation, then the people who you're trying to fight for are the ones that are left behind in the end, because you're so busy and focused on winning and being able to say, I won, what are you really winning for? Are you winning for ego, or are you winning for what's going to be best and fighting for the people? And that's what we see, not just on the national level, but even here in the state, on the state level, even on the local level. Anytime those parties get involved with each other, there's always, I'm going to win, I want to win, is at the end. And that's the mantra that is held up.
It's amazing that the value of the political system itself is not a win-win. And we still call ourselves a democracy. It just blows my mind. There should not be that type of power struggle. There should be some kind of openness to making sure that everyone involved has a piece of the pie, but that's not the case. What do you think will make you that leader that will be able to make a change?
Thank you for asking that question. Like I said, going back, looking at my 8 years of service at the state capitol, being able to think outside of that box of being straight for my party and being willing to take those darts that were thrown at me, being ostracized for my point of view on education. And with that, I believe that parents should have a choice on what type of school setting they want for their children. It should not be the government determine that your child has to attend this school because they're in this zip code, especially if that school is not performing at the level that that parent feel that it should be. Not for anybody else, it's up to that parent. And so because of my stance on education when it came to school choice, many times it was opposite of what my party, Democratic Party, felt. And because I was willing to be bold and stand for what I believed in, I was able to work more closely with the Republicans on those education issues, which also opened the door for me to be able to talk to them on other issues that might not have been the same as what I believed in. And one of those important things I was able to do for Clayton County was bring $45 million to our county because of the loss of the jet fuel tax from the airport. So the FAA had a ruling that if you collected sales tax from jet fuel sales, that you had to spend it where it was collected. Clayton County does not own the Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson Airport. It's the city of Atlanta. But 80% sits on our soil in Clayton County. And that's what caused the dilemma. We couldn't collect it because of the FAA ruling. But because I have been a strong advocate, a strong legislator at the state capitol, I was able to go in and speak with Governor Deal to ask him about helping us to come up with a relief for Clayton County temporarily until we can figure out what our next steps are going to be. And so with that, he was able to allocate and find $45 million for our one county. Other counties benefited, but that was the first time that I know of a $45 million coming to one county, especially a majority Democratic county.
That is tremendous. That's absolutely tremendous. But where does that money go? Does it trickle down to everyday people like, our citizens and even our homeless? Where does that money go?
Yeah, so that money was our SPLOST money. And so that's the money
for education.
For road improvements, for the school system, of course, the East SPLOST, there was the East SPLOST money, but the others were the local cities and counties, so road improvements, technology, all those things that we use the SPLOST money for. And what it did was it saved the taxpayers in Clayton County from having to pay a $45 million bill.
Okay. Wow. Well, tell me this, what are the problems that you see right now in your county and the adjacent counties to you?
Okay. So this particular race is statewide. So when I'm looking at the focus on issues that I see, I'm looking at it from all 159 counties in 538 cities representing as a U.S. Senator. And so one is economic opportunities. When it comes to starting off with education, making sure that every child has that foundation. And this is universal, whether it's urban or whether it's rural, there are still challenges with how we're delivering education for our students. I believe that every student that graduates from the high school should have a trade certification that will allow them to immediately go into workforce if they want to. And then if they want to continue a higher ed with 4-year, 2-year college, they can do that at an affordable rate where they won't have this huge student debt, because that certification is going to automatically earn them a higher wage than minimum wage.
I like that.
The other part is small businesses. As we've seen with COVID-19, many of our small businesses have suffered. You're a small business owner yourself. And what we saw happens when you say small business, the way that SBA classifies it is 500 employees or less. Well, I want to look at reclassifying it to include micro small businesses that may be 100 employees or less. Because when it came to the SBA loan, it mostly went to the ones on the higher end of that small business spectrum. And those are the 100 employees or less. Like I have my own business. We were kind of left out of that loop. And that really are hiring the local people in our community and keeping them working. And also that's our own income, that we had to no longer have, because that is our small business that we have. And so those two things were economic opportunity, and identifying other ways that we can even improve entrepreneurship and research and development and help and support our small businesses and small startups. The second part is dealing with government efficiency. Our government is not efficient. That means that we're not connected with the federal, the state, and the local. There's so much disconnect in between. And so if we're able to be more efficient, like in times of a pandemic like this, it would have been easier for that money to flow down, for the resources to flow down from the federal to the state and even to the local, which is what affects us mostly above all is what's going on in your local level. The next thing is looking at global stewardship. And so we can't be an island by ourselves in America because we don't have all the products and resources here to be able to do it. So we have to have a better international relationship across this world. And even as I sit on 5 committees in the House of Representatives, which gives me an additional insight into a lot of things. I'm on small business development, economic development, tourism, interstate cooperation, and education appropriations. I also have a leadership position as the vice chair of education subcommittee on academic achievement. And so being able to take all of that experience that I've been able to garner over the years, and also seeing what I've been able to visit other rural areas and even our urban areas, and being able to see these are some disconnects that I've seen that as the next U.S. Senator will be at the top of my list and working to make sure we have access and awareness, because that's what usually hinders us, especially those on the lower end of the totem pole.
That's tremendous. That's a lot of work. That is a lot of work. And you're going to need some support in order to do that, because what I have noticed with COVID, it has ripped the curtain away from how politics is run. I've never heard in my lifetime a state governor suing a city mayor. It was a blatant understanding, at least to me looking on, that there was a huge disconnect with management. How easy will it be to clear up that management?
Yes. And so that goes along with understanding the dynamics, understanding how policy works. And so once you understand the dynamics and understand how policy works, then you're able to go in and even talking from the federal level, understanding what the needs are on the county, and then understanding the needs on the city. So whenever you do have, a governor that says, I'm going to sue the city, and you're not suing all the cities, that brings question into that. And at the end of the day, that's taxpayers' money, because you had to now get the attorney general involved, who is a statewide elected official, to be the person that's defending the governor. And then the city of Atlanta had to get their attorneys together, which that's money for the city of Atlanta residents that they're going to have to. And then during the COVID crisis, those two, the state and the city, need all of their money going into a more directed resource, not a battle back and forth on who wants to win at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
People ones that suffer at the end. So being able to kind of talk about what those needs are. And I think that also goes back to access and awareness. A lot of people are not aware of what the federal government's role is to a certain extent. And also, what is that access? Okay, I'm aware of what the departments do, but how do I tap into them? A lot of the money that came down to our local government for nonprofits, it should have been able to spread out even more, because the need is so much greater. But what happens is when you only have a few nonprofits who always get the money, and those other nonprofits who are not in the know, don't get a chance to get it. But those are the ones who are really servicing the people and going out every day, risking their lives to make sure people are fed. They're trying to work with them on utilities, and even the whole unemployment claims is another debacle that needs to be straightened out because it's affecting people's lives. These are not people who were trying to skim the system. There are people who were employed, worked and put money into the system. Now they're expecting the system to put money back into them in their time of need.
And this second time around, do you think that there is going to be more allocation to people like myself, even as, as a business owner? It's just me. And so, I get overlooked, when it comes to talking about small business owners. So do you think that there's enough information out there now to where people like, you and I with less than 50 people who are employed will now get their share?
I would hope so. I can't say for sure that that's going to be what it is. I would hope that as our leaders in Washington, D.C. are looking at, providing that money down to, to the local governments, to the schools, that they also remember about the small businesses, especially those who could not take advantage of the PPP or the advanced loan that still need to survive. And even if they're looking at restructuring their business, they still need support in being able to do that. And I think our small business development centers, when they were brought on board, to me was kind of too late because the money had already started coming out and had already started flowing. And the small business development centers, which are funded by SBA, should have been right there in the beginning before the money even was given out. That way, small businesses like ourselves could have gotten more help and support in what that process was going to be.
Where can small business owners become more educated? Because this is the first time for many people to be in a situation like this. Usually you do your taxes and then you move on about your day, and you try to get loans and kind of get denied left and right. So we're caught in between the crossfires. Where can we become more educated about business moving forward?
Yeah. So I would recommend two places. One place is no cost to get the information. That's the small business development centers. Mm-hmm. And so these centers are set up at all of our four-year universities across the state of Georgia. And you can just Google Small Business Development Center, and you can be able to make an appointment, of course, virtually now. And they can give you help with your business on how to expand it, what services are available across the state and even nationally for your business, and because they're funded through the SBA. The second one was definitely encourage you all to be a member of your local Chamber of Commerce. A lot of times the Chamber of Commerce do a lot of workshops within their chamber for their members to kind of help support them. And they're also one of the arms that also lobby us on the state level and even on the federal level for better opportunities for small businesses. So that membership money that you end up paying, does go a long way, especially if you have an active Chamber of Commerce that you're a part of. And you could be part of more than one Chamber of Commerce, depends on what type of business that you have.
Well, the interesting thing about that as well is, as a small business owner, oftentimes there's not money to be allocated for membership. So you still get left out of the game.
Yeah. So that's why I suggested the first one, which was free.
And I appreciate that.
Helping you to be able to grow your business, and then even reaching out to the chamber and asking them, do they have a trial period, to kind of see. Because you want to join the chamber so you can get more business, and so that you can get to the point where you can be able to be a full member. And now, because of COVID-19, many of them may have changed their way that they do their membership, because they know the small business have been affected by COVID-19. So I'm always a person that I don't think they can say is no. So you ask. And then making that suggestion, say, hey, had y'all thought about doing a trial 30-day or 60-day, with the chamber to kind of see if you like it. and maybe even doing a reduced cost on it just to get you into the chamber. But in the meantime, like I said, those small business development centers are pretty good because they also allow you to have access to loans. You mentioned earlier about everything has been uncovered. And you're right. It's like we had a Jack in the Box, and I don't know if you remember Jack in the Box. You turn that handle, and Jack jumps out the box. You can't put him back in. It's real
Can't put
hard
it back.
to put him
You
back
can't
in.
unsee it.
Right.
You can't unsee it. You got to deal with it now.
Yeah, that's what's happened with COVID-19. And we've seen a lot of waivers that have been given on the federal level, even on the state level, that have been unprecedented. We've never had these waivers. Even in education, we've given waivers that we may have fought for many years. And so my whole point of view on that is that if these waivers are working during a time of crisis, then surely they will work when we get back to normal. So we don't need to go back to the old ways. Let's look at those things that we've done. Have we been innovative in telehealth, and also other ways that we're delivering health across the state of Georgia? Also, when it comes to education, now you have distance learning. That at one point the schools districts were pushing back against any kind of virtual learning. Now they were thrust into it and they have to adapt. But now you have teachers that are not used to that. They didn't get a professional development with that. And so all of those are learning areas that we can now improve on. I think in education, you're going to see more parents deciding that they want those smaller classrooms. So you might see some micro schools that are popping up. And so because they're still fearful of what's going to happen with COVID-19, but they also want to make sure that those children get the best education.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'm glad that we're on this subject because I know that there's been a lot of talk about things getting back to normal. Like you said, Jack in the Box. Now that we've seen Jack in the Box, our new normal is totally different. We can't unsee what we have been going through, so far. So moving forward, what kind of futuristic things, you mentioned a few, do you see that you'll be able to implement once you're in the position? Look, I'm speaking into existence. Yes. That's interesting. Yeah. But what kinds of futuristic things do you see beyond the school system? And I like a lot some of the things that you mentioned about schools.
Yes. I think in healthcare, being able to have people more in charge of their own health delivery. I think getting away a lot from the HMOs, because sometimes those powerful health companies are really not focusing really on your health. They're about getting you in. You have 15 minutes with the doctor, they're getting you back out. Mm-hmm. And so we've seen that so many people with pre-existing conditions have now suffered a lot when it came to COVID-19. They're the ones that are actually carrying the virus a whole lot longer and needing more help, and more money is being spent with that. Whereas had it been a more preventive measures done early on, when you talk about health care for everyone, it should not be based on your employment as to whether you have health care. It should be a given, because if you're healthy, then you're going to go to work. Then the production is going to be there for the business owner that's looking for, viable and healthy workers. If you're healthy, your children will go to school. You won't have to worry about all those days of being absent from school. So having a healthy community is good for everybody. For the economy, it's good for the education system as well. And so one of the things I'll be pushing for is looking at how do we, now that we have these waivers, how do we reinforce and even work and improving those waivers to better service the people that really need it. The high cost of healthcare, even if you're working, is extremely high. Even as even as somebody that's a state employee, even though they have a discount, it's too high. So we're looking at how we even are funding our health system. The pharmaceutical companies, is too much that we're paying for medicine. And so how do we look at even having a more healthier community? We have many food deserts that are across the state in certain communities, which ends up resulting in bad health. I served on the maternal mortality study committee. Well, African-American women are dying more, 3 to 4 times more than any other race because of childbirth-related issues. And it comes from not having that healthy balance before prior to getting pregnant. And so when you're looking at, that's a pandemic by itself, more black people dying 3 to 4 times than any other race. And so when you have a state that said, well, we know it's an issue, but we're really not going to want to focus on it as much, and you have to keep pushing for legislation and money being set aside. So those are things I'll be looking at. How do we make a more healthier community through things like community gardens, through things like allowing for more accessibility to fresh fruits and vegetables. And also, even in our early learning center, starting even early with how we are teaching our kids on healthy eating, because in the long run, that's going to be beneficial. On the business spectrum side of it, like I mentioned earlier, more research and development. How do we help and make business grow? How do we allow for more financing that needs to be for small businesses, especially those that are not the normal type of business, like radio? Most people might not look at radio as a normal type of business because it depends on, you know, your listening audience, and it depends on how much advertisement that you may get. But then look at the benefit that you have in getting information out to the overall community. So there are certain industries that are hard for them to get financing for. So through SBA and COVID-19, we saw with fintech companies, now we're allowed to give out loans, small business loans, like PayPal, Square, and even a lot of smaller community banks. This was unheard of. And even when they had the lapse in how much the credit requirements that they had in order for you to get the loans. So those are the type of things I'll be pushing for, is unconditional, untraditional, non-traditional types of funding finance for our small business, for them to be able to grow and expand. Because 60% of America is made up of small business owners. And we're the ones that are employing our community. So we have to make sure that they're stabilized. And so you heard me mention a little bit about the education part, as far as allowing money to be allocated per child. Right now in the state of Georgia, we have an old funding formula since the 1980s that is not allocated per child. And so say, for instance, if that allocation, that we had a funding formula that was set for per child, then those parents who decide that their children want to go to, if it's private school or homeschool, or whether the out-of-the-box thinking that we're looking at now, as you might have a teacher that says, I don't want to return back to the classroom. I want to have my own school, but I don't want to have it in a building. I might want to have it in my home. So how do you pay for that without the parents having to come out their pockets? We're already taxpayers. So why do we have to come out of our pocket again to pay for education? But if you had that per pupil funding, then you can allocate that to that teacher or whatever education setting to cover the cost that it would cost to educate that child all the way up to 12th grade.
I love that. And, you know, everything that you're talking about so far, I agree with. It sounds very promising. It sounds, you know, it's forward thinking. My question to you is, how much, a lot, support do you need in order to move these issues forward? So it's great to know exactly what the big picture is going to look like, but just how much do you think you'll be able to accomplish in your new position, provided people will get out and vote? Hopefully there are voters out there. Everybody has their voter registration card. Yes, if you don't, yes, make sure you get it. So after the election, and say you get the election, moving forward, you're in Washington, how much of this do you think that you'll actually be able to achieve?
Well, all of it's already in motion now. That's the good thing about it. It's different when you're starting from scratch, which I've seen some projects starting from scratch at the state capitol, and it takes a while for it to get to moving. The momentum is there. People want to see a change. They've seen what the worst is as of right now when it comes to COVID-19 and how it has affected so many aspects of our lives. So they're looking for a difference. They know that we won't get back to normal as normal used to be, but as close to it, how do we get there? So because the momentum is already there, and also the other part is educating the community more, going back to what I talked about, awareness and access. So being able to tell them this is available, this is what can happen. And if we get enough people that's saying, yes, that's what I want to happen, that means people going to have to voice their opinion and start speaking up. We saw that with the Black Lives Matter and all of the different marches across the United States and even nationally. They have changed a lot of policies that were very stringent before the whole, everything that happened with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and all those things. But because people decided we don't want to take it anymore, we're going to speak up, we're going to stand together. And that's what I see that, getting into Washington, D.C., using the momentum that's already there, using the policies that we've already put in place as a waiver, and seeing how do I work with both Democrats and Republicans to now make those policies etched in stone until we need to change them again. And knowing that just because you have a policy today does not mean it has to stay that way forever. And that's what we're looking at in Washington, D.C. Some of these policies are outdated. Even on the state level, you will be surprised at some of our outdated policies. And only when there's an issue comes up is when we now look at that particular policy.
Yeah, there's some interesting things on books right now that blew me away. And, here in 2020, we're still governed by laws from ancient days. So, yeah. There's a whole lot of cleanup to be done. Wow. Children going back to school in Georgia. What's that going to look like in just a few short days?
Well, many of them have already started back on some of the news feeds. And I think that still goes back to the parents, right? But also at the same time, our school leaders have to be mindful of public safety. They have to be mindful, and I'm not saying they're not, but they have to be more mindful of the teachers and their educators. They have families too. And so when you're asking them to come back into a building with a pandemic that we don't know what's going on with it, we can't see it. It's different when you had certain diseases. You can look at someone and tell that something was wrong with them. Now you can't. Some people don't even know they're carriers or have the virus until they actually get tested. And then the long length of time that it's taken for results to come back from being tested, I think that we're still rushing too fast to go back into the building face to face. And I look at it like this: if our state offices are not open, our Department of Labor is not open, the governor's mansion is not open, and our other state buildings are not open, that usually are open to people coming in, why would you think that schools should be open if we're not even opening up our offices? The courthouses are not open. And so that tells me that's kind of hypocritical, because you're saying schools can open back up, but our office building where people actually need to come in and get services, like that I talked about earlier, the unemployment claims are not being processed. People want to talk to people. They want to see people that tell them, this is my problem. How can I get it resolved so I don't be evicted, so my lights are not cut off, my insurance I need to pay? These are all things. And so when we talk about schools, I think that those are our most precious jewels are our kids. And our next precious jewels are our teachers, those educators who have decided to go into this particular field for one reason or the other. And we should be looking at how do we protect them. That means we got to be a little bit more innovative on how we deliver education. They don't have to be in person to be able to deliver education. There are a lot of other opportunities, and we have to be willing as leaders to be able to bend from those policies. And that's what has really kept our education system behind so many other foreign education systems, because we don't want to bend on those policies where we need to bend at. And that just because we bend don't mean we have to stay bent. We can straighten back up, but if this needs to be done at this time in this particular community, we need to be willing to do that. And then if it doesn't work, okay, just like anything with being a small business. You say, I'm going to open up a business. It doesn't work. As entrepreneurs, we don't say, oh, I'm going to sit down. I guess I ain't going to try it. You say, oh, you know what? I learned something from that. Now let me go try this business, and maybe I can come back to this one. So we have to be able to, to think like that as leaders, and we have to put people in place that's able to be willing to take those chances to make sure, because you're taking chances to make sure it's better for the environment. So I think going back to school too soon, I think that's what's happening. I think that there are other creative ways we can do, like I mentioned earlier about some of the micro schools. And I think as a community, we have to step up to help support each other in our own communities. So nothing wrong with having a surrogate parent. Say, for instance, I'm somewhere and I know my neighbors across the street, they may have to go to work. They may have older kids, but they know they're going to need to stay on top of them. There's nothing wrong with me calling and saying, hey, did you do your live lesson? Were you in school this particular day? Or when the kids want to come out and play, I'm able to stand on my porch and I'm able to watch them, because I know their parents are not there. So those type of things as a community, we need to step up.
Like the old days.
Yes, and that way we can be able to really make sure that the kids are safe and that they're getting that education that they need. And then there are other creative ways to give education. Look at what we're going through with the pandemic. You can create a lesson out on that. They don't have to stick with the curriculum that we have in place with the state of Georgia. You can come back to that. And that's the other thing when you talk about personalized learning that we need to do more in the state of Georgia.
I love the idea of personalized learning and small group learning. I absolutely am an advocate of it. I am an educator as well. I taught at Spelman for 7 years, and
Oh, okay.
I did substitute teaching while my girls were in school. So I, did that K through 12. And I know firsthand, number one, recess is a time where teachers can take a break. So if
Mhm.
I am trying to separate folks with social distancing all day, that
Mhm.
one teacher is absolutely exhausted. And I think it's so unfair to ask the schools to get back online so soon. I totally agree with you. And then I also wonder how much support in terms of mental wellness are we
Mhm.
providing the administrators and educators out there, because like you said, they have families as well. They don't know, there's no book as to how to manage yourself through a pandemic and keep yourself safe and try to keep children safe. I think it's just way too much to ask, especially thinking of school, like we saw on the news, the once the bell rings and those kids flood into the hallways, it's a wrap. There's no
Mhm.
social distancing. It doesn't exist.
That's right.
It doesn't
That's
even exist when you do it intermittently. It
mhm.
still doesn't exist. So I just don't. I think that is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. My girls are out of school, thank goodness, but as a parent, I know that my mental health stress level would be through the roof right
Yes.
now. And that in itself is a trickle down effect when it comes to um, how we govern ourselves with work and domestic violence. That rate
Yes.
has gone up
Increase.
tremendously, and we all know that there are many school children who use school as a safe zone because their
Right.
home life, unfortunately, is a war zone for whatever reason. And there are
Mhm.
many reasons for that. But, you know, how are we? We're not. I know we're not. There's nothing in place to help our mental health state in all of this, but there needs to be.
Yeah. Definitely mental health is a huge issue. And not just for the adults, even the children.
Absolutely.
Before COVID-19, I was working with one of the agents with GBI and my other colleagues in the legislature about having a uniform type of training that's done for educators about teen suicide and suicide, because it's very high in the state of Georgia, and it was even we had the lady had mentioned to us about a 9-year-old that had committed suicide. And so when you think about it, you like 9 years old, you don't have to pay no bills, you don't have to do anything. But then you start thinking about bullying and social media and how that plays a part on it. So you just think about that before COVID-19. Now COVID-19 is hit, and now you got more people on social media, more young people on social media, more time for them to bully, and all of that. And then you got the parents going through so much mentally, trying to figure out, am I going to be living here next month? Do I have the food to be able to pay? How am I going to cover all my bills? So they really don't have a lot of time to watch and monitor the social media that the kids are on, whether they are the predators or the victims. They don't have that particular time. And now you throwing in them having to be at home for school. That's a whole nother level, and a stress level for the kids. They're used to going out, seeing their friends and socializing. Now they're stuck with their siblings that they see all the time. And so you got
And
all
some they get along with and some they don't.
right. And so you got all different levels of mental issues or challenges with children, with the parents, and then, like you said, the educators, and then the administrators who have such a huge responsibility for all of these kids. And then you have the board members who are responsible for setting the policies for all these kids. So there are different levels, and what's being done, I really don't know. I would hope that that we are providing I know during session, we had an extended session, that there was some money allocated more for mental wellness. But at what level, like I said, you got different categories of people that need that, and they need to be able to have someone to talk to that, even if it's for 5 minutes. I'm about to go crazy around here. I'm about to do something to these children. I already, when I go to work, I get a break.
Yes.
With them all day.
Exactly.
So I know child abuse cases, also were on the rise as well, along with domestic violence.
Right, exactly. And so I just see things getting worse because we're not paying attention to how the average human navigates their life through all of these stresses and challenges, mostly because there's just the unknown about COVID. Even if we have the best laid plans in place, there's still this unknown because we've never dealt with it before.
Right.
So there really does need to be some level of mental health that's allocated for both parents and children, and that's in my estimation, that's one reason why there are so many heightened levels of domestic violence and suicides, is because there's no one to talk to, there's nobody talking about it, there's nobody to go to. And even as politicians, you guys need it as well, because you're dealing with it is the epitome of having the whole world on your shoulders. Am I right?
Yes.
So, there still needs to be some attention paid to that. Let me piggyback on what we're talking about in terms of school and talk about the school prison pipeline. Where are we on those issues? Because we do know that there is a direct link between school and prison, policing, and sandwiched in between, and all of that. What does that look like during this time?
It definitely has end up increasing, because during this time, even though you have people in kind of sheltered in, but crime is still rising, because whenever you have people confined to a certain area and there's a need, like with COVID, people are in need of money because might not be getting the unemployment, or they've been laid off, their hours been reduced, and so crime does increase physically, and even like we talked about earlier about domestic violence, we talked about child abuse. And I think that when we look at the school to prison pipeline, and it should never have been based on the education level of our students, because that's what it's based on. And when you're looking at grade how grading is for what level, how many kids are on third grade level, and then you're looking at it again in middle school, and that's how you base it on how many prisons are going to be built based on their educational level. Because the reality is, if you have someone that's going to age out of the school system, because it's going to happen, they're going to turn 18 or 21 if they have special needs, they're going to no longer be a part of the school system. That means they become a part of our society, and everybody is responsible at that time. And so when you have that child does not get a foundation of education, then they're going to end up in two places or both places. One is in prison, because we are humans. We got to have survival, and we got to do those things, whether they're right or wrong. By nature, we got to survive. And so that ends up causing a lot of young people to have to go into prison. And then because of how we have our sentencing, so many mandatory sentences on certain things, and then we don't have enough of a fair representation with public defenders because they're so overloaded. So sometimes they talk the defendants into taking a plea when they know they're not guilty. So once they get into that system, they're in that system. And then we look at how you talk about prison reform. How do you reform someone who's been locked up for so many years, and then you reacclimate them back into our society? We call them returning citizens. But then if they don't get the education, foundation, or training inside of that prison to help them to be able to survive when they come out, they're going back. And then when you don't have employers that are willing to hire those returning citizens, then that ends up repeating the cycle, and they go back to what they're used to doing, which is somebody telling me when to get up, somebody tell me what to wear, and all of that.
Structure.
So if we're looking at it from a preventive measure, we have to start with educating the kids before they're even born. When they're in that mother's womb, our kids should be getting 3 million words, hearing 3 million words or more. But in lower income communities, that does not happen. And that's when that difference happens in the different level of education. And when more affluent parents, as their kids get older, they expose them more to resources for tutoring, expose them with traveling. Where if you're a parent that's making minimum wage, because of your education, going back to what I said, you aged out and you didn't have a foundation, then you're stuck. You can't take your kids to the library as much as you want to. You can't travel them to expose them. You can't afford tutoring because they're behind academically. So that gap starts to widen and widen and widen. And by the time they get into to high school, it's so wide that even if they graduate, they're still going to have a struggle with trying to find either employment or if they want to go into business for themselves. There has never been no exposure there for those kids to say, hey, did you know that you can be your own entrepreneur? Did you know you're naturally talented in these areas? This is something that you can do. And so one of the things I've done over the years is we had a program called Youth Science. And Youth Science is an aptitude test where they don't measure your academic, but your natural talents.
I love that.
What they've done is that the kids take this, they kind of like playing a game like Minecraft or something like that. And so when the results come out, it tells the parents and the students what you're naturally talented in. And then that way, the school districts now can look at how you change your curriculum. If you have a large number of students in this particular area, then change some of your curriculums that you think that the kids should go into. If they're naturally talented, then you build upon those skills that they naturally have. And then you look at those industries that they can be able to go into. And that even helps that local community to recruit those type of businesses because every business is looking for a workforce. So those type of things like that with dual enrollment is another option that we have in the state that I push a lot that allows students to attend high school and go to college at the same time with no cost to the parents. I had a niece that participated. She did an alternative graduation. She finished out her first 2 years of high school and she went full-time to Atlanta Metropolitan and graduated with an associate's degree a week before she graduated with a high school diploma. So now she has an advanced degree at 18 years of age. So those type of programs, but I think it still boils down to exposure. And we have to be able to hold accountable our school districts that are not performing on the level they should and give them the resources. And then when we give them the resources, we have to have accountability because a lot of times they get money comes in and then they start spending too top heavy for the central office and the money is not going down to directly to that school, to that principal that allow them to function and give them the autonomy because each community is different. Give us the principals the autonomy and give the teachers the freedom they need. They've gone to into this profession and we're saying you all are great. We know that you have the skills to do it, but then at the same time we are tying their hands. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. And those school districts are those schools where we've seen that teachers are free and have that freedom to teach. You see that more kids are learning, and because they're not just sitting at a desk, and the kids are not sitting at a desk. So those type of changes have to be done in our education system so we can cut that school to prison pipeline. It can be done. It's going to take some work and some willingness of people to get away from the traditional way of thinking.
There are a lot of pieces involved there. There are a lot of pieces involved there. And I totally agree with you. Teachers' hands are tied. They absolutely are. They're either going to meetings. There's just no quality of life, I know for sure, for public school teachers, because I was one. They're either going to meetings, meetings within meetings, then class prep, then trying to separate children. Now we've got social distancing, and it's too much. It's too much. So I am thrilled that we are reinventing the educational system. The other thing that you mentioned with children, the one thing I know for sure that will build confidence is letting them know what they are good at. Maybe they're not good at math and science, but to be able to have a class and embedded education within that whole experience of school that's enhancing the natural talent that they do have is a huge confidence booster.
Yes.
But a lot of kids go to school just being told you're not good enough. You didn't pass this test, you're not good enough. You didn't, you barely made this grade, you're not good enough. And teachers now are telling children, well, if you just do ABC, that's good enough to pass. Why are we teaching that value?
Right.
Just do just enough to pass. No, we've got to change the system to match those brilliant minds that we have in the educational school system. I love what you're saying. I do. I love what you're saying. Tell us a little bit about you. What brought you to want to become a leader in the world of politics?
Okay, so like I said, I grew up in Southeast Atlanta. Very heavy influence with my dad, who's a community advocate, and actually he has a bridge named after him on I-75 on University Avenue. It says Love Stovall Bridge.
Pass by it all the time.
Yeah, so that's my dad, and so I have two sisters, and so I guess because he didn't have any boys, he spent a whole lot of time extra with us, and he's always been a strong community advocate. Been involved with many political campaigns over the years, and of course we helped in many of the campaigns. And the funny part about it, when I became a state representative, some of the people that were my colleagues, I remember helping them in their campaign, as younger than what I am at that particular time. And so that is what kind of drove me into community service, being a PTA president, vice president, membership chair, and then on the Atlanta Council of PTAs, which oversees the PTAs citywide when I was in Atlanta. So that gave me the other educational part of it as well. Having a son that had a learning disability thrust me into learning a lot more about education so that I can be able to help support his learning. And then being able to see those things that I saw that needed to change, and not having the power that I felt I didn't have the power because you didn't have that title by your name that people would listen to you. So when I moved to Clayton County in 2006, at that time, the school system had lost their accreditation. I was still actively involved as a band booster mom, and some other things we did in the community. And then we had our small business, commercial printing business that was located in Clayton County as well. And so from that, wasn't thinking about getting into politics. And then in 2012, the seat became vacant. The person who had the seat decided to run for another seat. And so when she decided to run for another seat, my dad said, "You down there, Clay, you've been doing something, why don't you run?" I was like, "No, Dad, I don't want to run." He said, "Why not? You make a good representative." I said, "No," I said, "My mouth, somebody gonna say something. I know I'm just gonna, I know my mouth, I'm my temperament, with people that don't want to do right." I said, "It's gonna be bad." He said, "You're not doing it, go ahead and do it anyway." He said, "Let's just see what'll happen." I said, "Okay, we'll see what happen." And so what happened was I got elected.
I love it.
Elected, for 4 terms now. And even when I decided to run for U.S. Senate, it wasn't something that's a lifelong dream I had. It was, like I said, watching everything that had been going on for the 8 years, and I felt I had kind of reached my max as a state representative. Of course, there's always more you can be doing, but I saw that when I see that we're putting bandages and the real problem solvers are in Washington, D.C., I said, well, I could take my 8 years of being able to work with both Republicans and Democrats and run as an independent so that I could be a free thinker and really be able to hammer in on those issues and being able to show both sides how we can be able to work together, because I've been able to do it in the state house, even though I was a Democrat, but I still consider myself as an independent because a lot of the issues I was able to agree on both sides of the aisle. And so that's what kind of got me involved in being elected. And as a state representative, I held several career job fairs because at that time, the unemployment rate was very, very low, very high. We had a lot of people that wasn't employed. So I saw the need, and I went and created a program to be able to help those in that particular need. Because I know how valuable parents are, I developed a program to be able to recognize them every year. We call it Dance on the Bridge. So we blocked off the bridge in Morrow and we celebrated parents who had volunteered 12 hours or more in the school system to celebrate them and gave them a certificate and called out everybody, all of them names. So those type of things. And then my first piece of legislation at the state capitol was HB 614, the Landon Johnson Act. And what it did was allow video cameras to be placed in the classrooms of special needs students who were in self-contained classrooms. And so, and it took us about a year to even get that bill passed. It wasn't mandatory, even though the parents and myself, we wanted it mandatory, but we got a lot of pushback from the school system. And this year I reintroduced the bill to make it mandatory. Then wasn't able to get it through the committee to move it forward. And so my second bill was House Resolution 1271. And so it created, it allowed for Single Parents Day to be recognized in the state of Georgia. So every March the 20th of every year is designated Single Parents Day in the state of Georgia. And and we came up with that because there are so many single parents across the state that have certain needs and requirements that they need to be able to get support from. And so being able to have that day set aside now allows for us a focus on those single parents, because you talk about this school to prison pipeline, many of those kids are coming from single parent homes that are usually led by mothers. And so whatever we can do as far as giving support and shining light to that particular segment of society, it wasn't that we promote single parent, but some people become single parents out of no choice or option of their own, whether it's through death or through anything else that might have happened, bad choices sometimes, but still we have children to raise. I was a single parent myself, so I understand the plight of single parents. So every year since we passed that bill in 2018, we recognize single parents. I've held the awards event. I have one coming up actually August the 22nd. We're going to do virtually. But we brought them down to the state capitol. We gave them resolutions and recognized them for all the work that they're doing with raising their children.
I love that. I love that. And I appreciate your backstory. I appreciate your passion. And I have, like I said in the beginning of our interview, I've noticed that you have been really good at seeing gaps and filling those gaps. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the fact that you are a forward-thinking politician and mother and community activist. Before we go, I want to ask you a real heart-to-heart question. How difficult is it for a Black woman to lead in this country? What are some of the things that you've noticed?
Yes, it's very difficult because you're not only facing the white male society, but you're also facing the Black male society. And then because women's role have always been kind of put into a box of you're expected to do this, and when you don't do what we're expected or you're known to be supposed to do, is staying at home, taking care of their family, there's no way that you could be smart enough to be an elected official. There's no way you can understand how policy works. And then not understanding that as women, especially Black women, that compassion that we have is what drives us to be successful. And so, having to stand up and even having to go against my party, as a woman, as a Black woman, some people looked at me strange, like, why are you say you're a Democrat, why are you not saying? I said, because I'm standing for what I believe is right. And so, and I know that even going up to Washington, D.C., which is on a higher level when it comes down to white male society, and then Black male society, and then you have white female society. I forgot about that particular category. Me too. Yeah. So Black female is like 1, 2, 3, the fourth one on the list, and that's expected not to do the most, and expected to kind of be into a box of this how we view you as a Black woman. And if you step outside of that box, then you're too aggressive, and you're trying to take over. So all of those type of things that have happened. Even most recently, I was in a press conference with 5 other my colleagues who are all Black women. And 2 of the Black women who led the press conference was later referred to by the Department of Labor Commissioner as inciting a riot. Now, we were at the unemployment office where people are crying and so much, disarray about the money that they were expecting to come in. And they were very emotional, which is understandable. And so they saw that on the news and then said we were inciting a riot. We said, oh, is it because of Black women leading a charge that it's a riot? But when white America is leading a charge, it is called a protest? No, it's no difference. It's just because of the faces that were there, at that particular press conference. So it is very, very hard. But I thank God for his grace and mercy for giving me the strength to be able to stand. And as long as I know what I'm fighting for is the right thing, then I continue to stand and continue to have to take those whips and beats and all of those, whether it's verbally, whether it's physically, but continue to stand. But yes, it is very, very difficult. And I think it's important for women like yourself and myself to continue to fight, because we have a future generation of young Black women, young ladies who are growing up and watching us on how we're dealing with it. Just like we watched those women before us who were great Black women. Some we knew about in the news, some we didn't know about, some in our own families that we watched raise us through turbulent times. And so because we were able to see them, then we have a responsibility now to make sure that we'll continue to open up that pathway for our future leaders to one day have a Black woman as a president. But more Black women over CEOs, over businesses, whether it's corporate or whether it's business they start themselves.
I can really appreciate your honesty about that. It is difficult, and I think that oftentimes we overlook how difficult it is to be brave enough to get into the ring and then be strong and brave enough to sustain. And with you going another level from state now to, Washington, D.C., you're going to have a whole different set of challenges. What do you say to Black women in general with how can we start to embody the leadership that we have in us? I think that we're really used to being suppressed and just succumbing to, what society says that we should be. You've already broken that barrier. What would you impart upon women to stand within their leadership, even if it's just leadership within their own families?
I believe is educate yourself on the issues. And one thing I always say is that I don't know everything, but those things I know very well. And even as a legislator, when I started, the best advice that was given to me is find an area or a subject or that you feel very passionate about, and you stay with that, and you make it. You be the expert in that area. And I've, been able to do that in education. I'm not an educator as a background, except for educating my children. But I had the passion and I had the tenacity to go to different conferences and to make and improve upon myself to make sure I was knowledgeable. I asked a whole lot of questions, even when it was time for people that was uncomfortable questions. But I asked so that I can be knowledgeable. And I can say that I think last year, and by me being on the education committee, any education bills come before our committee. And I had a couple of my colleagues even approach me and say, Vanessa, I know you know just about everything with education. Look at my bill and tell me what you think about my bill, how you think I need to take it through the process. And these were some people that had talked about me real bad, about the stance that I made in education, but I didn't hold that against them. I looked at it as God giving me favor to show that all the hard work I had done was now paying off. So continue, as Black women, continue to fight and make sure you're educating yourself on those issues that are most passionate for you. And then bring along other people with you. Success is not success when you're by yourself. When you get to the end and you're holding up, yeah, I won, and you're looking around and nobody's there to help celebrate or that you can pass the torch to. We have a responsibility that where we are, that we have to bring some people along with us. And then making sure that we're also protecting them at the same time until they're strong enough to be able to stand on their own. So I definitely, those are some pieces of advice. And then accountability, ask questions. I tell my children, ask questions till you get the full understanding. I say that people get offended when you ask a question, and they might have something to hide. And yet means you need to dig a little deeper. And I know you know good at asking questions, your radio personality. So asking those questions until you feel comfortable with what their answer is. But don't give up, even though it gets very, very hard. Don't give up, and you definitely have to have faith.
I love that. And I just have one more question before we close. What I have noticed is the more women that decide to move forward in leadership, especially Black women, um, there tends to be this pushback from Black men who believe that we are forgetting them in some way. What do you say about that? It's so unfortunate that they can't champion, not all, but some can't champion the woman who is moving forward in leadership, and instead think, well, what about us? Well, we're there for you as well. We're not excluding you. What do you say? What's your take?
I would say that also comes from how that Black man may have been raised. If he was raised in a family where mom was successful and he saw dad being successful with mom and them working together, then that's a whole nother outlook that he may have. And also understanding, I think that's why it's important even for our young men that even have to be raised in single parent households, to be able to helping them to understand as much as possible, even though we can't raise a boy per se, but we can instill into him and to them those traits to say, respect that woman. If it happens to be a Black woman, respect that Black woman, support her, because at the end of the day, her thoughts are always on you as her Black man.
Absolutely.
And it's not a competition. It is, let's work together. And if you're successful, she's successful. She's successful, you're successful. And that you have to have that confidence that you know that she's not trying to do it to outdo you. And if you feel that, then don't be with that type of person. That's not the person you want to be with. You want to be with someone that said, hey, let's work together. And hey, how do we help support each other? Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to matter. Is if I'm successful, I made it, and you with me and we together, you don't have to look at, they say, oh, your woman runs you. It's nothing about my woman running. I support my Black woman that I'm with. And so that comes back with how we are instilling those traits into our young Black men and even our young Black women, for them to understand you don't have to stand back when you know that you're successful and you're good in those things. And you try to find someone that's on that same level. Sometimes it's hard. And sometimes you may have to go that road by yourself. But that doesn't mean that you have to look down on the Black men. That's the other thing I think that has contributed to it as well. That sometimes some Black women have looked down on, I don't need a man. I don't need that man, this and that. And that might not be the case. God didn't make us to be here by ourselves.
Exactly.
At the same time, you don't want a man that's going to bring you down and not support you. And the same thing, you don't want to have he doesn't need a woman that's not going to support him. So we supporting each other. So we know that the ultimate goal is to be successful together.
If we could just spill that idea over into business and into politics,
Yes.
We would be on to something. And I thank you so much for moving forward as a Black woman to have your passion funneled in a way that's going to speak to the masses and make people's lives better. Thank you for that. I champion you. I'm behind you 1,000%. And I just pray that we can get our male counterparts to understand that when we move forward in power, it doesn't mean that we're trying to exclude them. They are very much a part of our DNA and a part of our thoughts and moving them forward as well. And if we could just get out of that thought process that, oh, well, you're a woman and you're going to forget about the man. No,
Right.
no, we're in this thing together. So thank you so much. I wish you the best. I see you in Washington, D.C. So we'll just take that.
Well, I definitely want to leave contact information. If anyone wants to reach out to the campaign, you can. I'm on all the social media platforms at Valencia Stovall on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Every Friday, I do a Talking with Stovall live show on different topics that are important. I just did immigration. I did a student panel. I did a teacher panel as well. And so we'll be probably do another one on college students now that they're having to go back in a different segment. We'll be doing one on senior citizens, how they're coping during COVID-19 as well. And then also one on mental health, eventually we will be doing as well. And also I did want to mention, when elected, I will be the first Black woman to ever be elected from the state of Georgia as a U.S. Senator. So we've never had a black woman to serve, and there are only 100 senators that represent the United States. There are 2 from each state. So it definitely is a privilege and an honor to be able to be up there among those other 100 senators that are representing the United States of America and taking that voice there. Go to my website, go Stovall.com for more information about what things I've done and what our other strategic plans are for the campaign and for the election.
I am so excited to see history in the making. And again, I'm with you 1000%. Any way that we can support you, please let me know. For those people who are listening and watching, vote. By all means, vote. And make sure that you are well versed in the policies that people have. And what they stand for, and look at a woman, a Black woman, leadership in power as a plus. Look at it as a plus, because Valencia, as you said, you've had feet on the ground. You started, just as a regular citizen with passionate, moving that passion forward to bless other people's lives. So thank you so much for being a part of the Black Women in Radio podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Wish you much success.
Thank you so much.
I'm State Representative Valencia Stovall of House District 74, and I'm a current representative that represents portions of Monroe, Lake City, Forest Park, College Park, and Riverdale, all in Clayton County. And I've been serving in the Georgia House of Representatives for 8 years. I've had to battle against my current party, which is Democratic Party, on issues that I believe are people issues and not party issues. And because of that, I want to go to Washington, D.C. as an independent, thinking independently. And because I was willing to be bold and stand for what I believed in, I was able to work more closely with the Republicans on those education issues, which also opened the door for me to be able to talk to them on other issues that might not have been the same as what I believed in. And one of those important things I was able to do for Clayton County was bring $45 million to our county because of the loss of the jet fuel tax from the airport. But at the end of the day, I want to be a champion for all of Georgia.